Hello and welcome to this tutorial on picking up stitches along the side of your work. This tutorial forms part of a series which is designed to help people with my Beachcombing Wrap pattern that's available on Ravelry. The link to the pattern is in the description down below. There are a number of different ways in which stitches can be picked up along the side of a piece of work. Obviously at the beginning and the end row it's very simple because there are existing stitches that one can pick up stitches into. But when working along the edges of the work, it's a matter of personal choice as to where the stitches are picked up. I want you to pick up 2 stitches for every stitch along the selvage edge. So one of the stitches that we've picked up will be picked up in the head of the stitch, and the other stitch will be picked up around the body of the stitch. Other patterns will just give you a total number of stitches to pick up along the side, and will leave it down to your best judgment as to where to pick up those stitches. But hopefully you'll see by this tutorial that picking up stitches along the edge is not that difficult and is just a matter of personal taste exactly as to where one picks up those stitches. So without any further ado, let's get on with the tutorial. Now there are a number of ways of attaching the yarn to the work. The one that will often be mentioned is to make a slip knot on the hook, then slip stitch into this joining part of the fabric, and then start your first stitch. So I'll just show you what that looks like, and why I'm not using it will become, I think, obvious, but I will point out why I'm not using that particular method myself, although you are entirely free to use this method if that makes you feel more secure and happier. So I'm going to make a slip knot. So I've got the tail end of the yarn, I'm wrapping it over my finger away from myself and then bringing it down, and I'm just going to hold it in place with my thumb. Now you'll notice I've crossed the yarn here. I'm now going to take the working yarn, bring that up over my finger away from myself. I've got 2 loops on my finger, and I'm going to take the back one off my finger over the front one, and there is the slip knot. Pop the hook in. I have my slip knot. I'm now going to join in the top of the chain from the last row that we worked on the spine. Again, make sure that you pick up 2 threads of that chain because it just makes it a more secure stitch when you do that. And then we're going to yarn over, pull up a loop and pull it through the slip knot on the hook. Now I think that this creates far too much bulk in this corner. It's also given me an extra knot that I don't want to have lying around the place, and even though we're going to work up this side and make this much bigger around here, I just think that it just draws attention to itself, this extra. The second way of joining the yarn is to just go into the top of the chain where you're going to join, lay the yarn over the hook, pull up a loop and chain 1. The chain 1 will actually secure the yarn in place. You can tighten it up with the tail end if you like. Now I'm going to hold the tail end along the side. I've maybe left that tail end a little short, but it will be fine for this demonstration purpose. Always give yourself a good few inches for the tail end, just so that you can weave it in if you need to, and to give you a little bit of leeway to work with. And now I'm going to work the first stitch into the top of that chain, and as you can see it just leaves a neater edge along what will be the short edge of our wrap. Now I'm going to work around the chain itself, and then we're going to work into the head of the stitch of the row below, and then we're going to work around the body of that stitch. Then we're going to work into the top of the chain 2, and it's where we're working is where the stitch along the spine, so where the chain 2 or the proper stitch comes out of the row below. So we're not having to find the place. It should be fairly clear where the head of the chain or the head of the stitch actually is. So we make a stitch there, then we make a stitch around the body of that stitch, which is the chain in fact. Now we're going into the head of that stitch, then we're going into the body, around the body of that stitch. Now we're going into the head of the chain 2, and can you see where the stitch is coming out of this chain 2? Well, that's where we're going to make this, pick up this stitch. Then we're going to work around the body of the chain 2. The chain 2 came out of the head of this stitch, so that's where we're going to pick up a stitch. Then we've got the body of that stitch, so we're going to do a chain around that. Then we've got the chain 2 where that stitch comes out of. As you can see, we're in the same stitch head, or the same chain 2 as the stitch grows out from, and then around the body of that chain 2. And the reason I'm doing it this way is just because it makes it easier. When you've got as many stitches to pick up as we have to pick up, having to count and having to work out where the stitches have got to go in order to make it work. There are probably neater ways, there are probably more elegant ways of doing this, but for me this is just the most simple and the most straightforward, and that's why I'm doing it this way. But there will be some patterns, for example, where you only put a stitch around the body of every other stitch, or maybe where you put 2 stitches around the body of one stitch but only 1 stitch around the body of the next stitch, and so on, just depending upon how flat the person wants this pickup edge to be. Because I know we're going to be working further out on this, I know that this is not of critical importance. It's not going to make the work look odd. It's not. If this were a border, I would be paying much more attention to it, but because it's just a working row where other stitches are going to come out, I know that we can block it to make everything look right. So now we're working around the body of this stitch, and then the head of that one, and the body of. Now we've got to the bottom, we've got an even number of stitches, we need an odd number of stitches. So this is the only place where I'm going to expect you to fudge. We got our beginning here, we need to put an extra stitch in here, and I don't simply, we could just put it around there, that would be fine. There is nothing wrong with doing that, it's perfectly fine. But I'd rather just pull this beginning edge into the corner a little bit more, just to make it tighter and neater. And so we're just going to fudge where we put it, but into the chain that's at the bottom, and that just makes, for me, makes that little bit neater and tighter. But if you want to work 2 stitches around the last body, please go ahead and do that, that's perfectly fine. So there we are, we've picked up stitches now all along the side, and oops, I'll make sure it's on camera. We picked up stitches all along the side, and that's the end of that tutorial. So I hope you agree that that tutorial was fairly straightforward. There is a great deal of flexibility when it comes to picking up stitches in crochet. In that respect, it's a lot easier than picking up stitches in knitting. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, please leave us a like. If you want to see more of the same content, please consider subscribing and you'll be notified when I upload new videos. And if you have any suggestions for what you'd like me to create videos for, then please leave them in the comments down below. I will read the comments and will act on any suggestions that I receive. So until next time, happy crafting and bye for now.